I'm turning 50 this month, and I want to celebrate by donating $100,000 of non-lethal aid to Ukraine. My friend Johnny Rogers runs Help Is On The Way UA. A special message from him is at the end of this video, or you can head on over and donate now. Let's get on to the video. What is going on with these Russian drones over Poland? First off, I am doing this from a hotel room in the Southwest. I'm here doing research on the Mormon Church for my next book, Lies to Rule Men, which is the sequel to The Last Republic. You can get that on Amazon or on Audible if you're a Marine. But the news out of Poland is a little too important to ignore. Second thing, if you want to support Ukraine, support my friend Johnny Rogers. He drives around in a van, essentially giving out non-lethal aid to soldiers in Ukraine. Go to helpisonthewayua.com, trying to raise $100,000 for him for my 50th birthday. There will be a special message from Johnny at the end of this video. All right, here's what went down regarding Poland. Overnight, Poland detected more than a dozen Russian drones crossing into its airspace. This wasn't debris falling across the border. These were live drones that went deep into NATO territory. Polish authorities counted, I think it was 19 separate incursions. Here's a key point. NATO scrambled fighters, Dutch F-35s, Polish F-16s. There's an Italian AWACS surveillance aircraft. You can imagine how the espresso is on that plane, right? There was even a German Patriot system that was alerted. And for the first time in NATO's history, alliance aircraft shot down Russian drones over the territory of a member state. That is not Poland acting alone. That's NATO collectively engaging Russian military assets inside NATO airspace. That is what NATO is designed to do. Poland's Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, called it a large-scale provocation. And he told his parliament, the closest we've been to open conflict since World War II. Now, NATO's Secretary General, Mark Rutte, didn't mince words either. He said if it didn't matter whether the incursion was intentional or not, it was reckless and dangerous. So what are these drones? Well, photos suggest they weren't Shaheds. Those were the explosive kamikaze drones that Russia normally sends into Ukrainian cities and are provided by Iran, although Russia is making them now. I think they were Gabara drones. They're small, relatively cheap reconnaissance models, possibly used as decoys. In other words, these weren't weapons meant to hit Polish targets, but tools to test NATO defenses. And that's important here because these drones penetrated more than 100 miles into Poland. That is way beyond what Belarus later tried to explain was like, oh, these were stray drones jammed by Ukrainian electronic warfare. Like, dude, spoofing and jamming, they can cause small deviations, maybe 10, 15 miles, which will increase if you're still going. But after hundreds of miles, you're not going to be affected by that jammer anymore. The trajectory, the timing, the sheer number of drones, it makes this look deliberate. And this is part of a pattern. Russia has been chipping away at NATO's resolve and their eastern flank for years. Why? 3 reasons here. First is, they're testing NATO. Russia wants to see how quickly NATO responds, how fast do the jets scramble, how coordinated are the Polish, Dutch, German, Italian systems. By forcing NATO to react, Russia can gather data on radar signatures, interceptor times, coordination between allies. That is really, really valuable intelligence. Second, political pressure. Poland is a frontline state. It has been one of Ukraine's staunchest allies by hosting logistics hubs inside their country, by hosting airfields inside their country where aid comes in, and by pushing Europe to send more weapons. By flying drones into Poland, Putin is reminding Warsaw and everybody else that supporting Ukraine comes with risk. It's psychological warfare aimed at civilians as much as it is militaries. And third thing here is signaling. Just a few days ago, Putin told reporters he wouldn't back down and warned Europe that if NATO troops ever set foot in Ukraine, they'd be considered legitimate targets. Sending drones into Poland right after that isn't a coincidence. It's a way of saying, hey, we escalate on our timetable, not yours. So what happens next? I mean, Poland invoked Article 4 of the NATO treaty. It's not the famous Article 5. It doesn't mean we're going to war. The attack on one is an attack on all. Article 4 is like a consultation clause. It says if a member feels threatened, the alliance has to meet and talk about it. Poland has only pulled this trigger a handful of times before, more recently in 2022, I believe. when Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. So this is actually pretty rare. In practical terms, NATO isn't going to go to war over these drones. Article 4 just means closed-door meetings, tightened air patrols, maybe new deployments of defense systems to Poland, probably air defense systems. Expect more joint exercises on the eastern flank, and Warsaw, they closed 4 airports during this incident, including Warsaw Chopin Airport, which I've flown out of before. That kind of disruption is what Russia wants. They want to make NATO spend resources, spread fear, show cracks in unity, cost them money. Now let's talk about the risks here. Incidents like this can spiral. Remember, it doesn't matter whether these drones are armed or not. The moment NATO jets fire on Russian drones in NATO airspace, we're kind of in uncharted territory here. Even an accidental incursion could trigger retaliation if someone makes the wrong call or they do it at the wrong time. And here's the irony here. Poland has spent billions modernizing its military. They doubled the size of their armed forces. They're buying Abrams tanks. They're buying, I think, every K2 tank that Korea is willing to sell them. They're going to have more HIMARS than the U.S. has HIMARS. And they're buying the F-35. It's cool to be in the military now if you live in Poland. And they are preparing for the possibility of direct war with Russia. But the actual flashpoint here, it wasn't a tank battle. It was cheap propeller-powered drones buzzing across the border. And that's kind of like modern warfare. You spend billions of dollars buying all this fancy equipment for a jet to shoot down something that costs $20,000. So here's the bottom line. This wasn't an accident. Russia is probing NATO to kind of see if the alliance blinks. If NATO shrugs this off, the next step could be a drone aimed at a Polish power plant or a Russian missile accidentally crossing into Lithuania, blowing something up there. Putin is gambling. The West doesn't want escalation badly enough to push back. But every time NATO responds quickly and decisively, kind of like they did last night, it raises the cost for Russia. And that may be the only thing that the Kremlin understands. Although, believe me, I would love to give them a little taste of a B-2 Iran style. But yeah, a guy can dream, right? Look, I'll keep following this as it develops. Right now, NATO is holding consultations. Poland is demanding a firm response. Russia's pretending it didn't happen, right? And somewhere in Moscow, analysts are poring over all that scramble data to just kind of figure out how fast it takes NATO to respond to something. And they're asking themselves the same question. What happens next? What happens next? Look, if you want more deep dives like this, you can support my work at ryanmcbeth.substack.com. I am grinding away here in the desert on my next book. And now for that special message from Johnny Rogers from Help Is On The Way UA. Thank you for watching.
Thank you so much for everything you guys do to support me. You make this possible. You help me help these guys. Thank you so much, Ryan McBeth, for the shout out. You make this possible. Every little donation counts. Please like, share, subscribe, and follow me. Go to helpisontheWayUA.com today. Do a donation. And follow Ryan, he's a great guy, and Ukrainian Relief Fund on Instagram. Thank you so much. Slava Ukraini!
Heroям slava! My goal here is $100,000. You can donate at the link below. Every dollar helps.